Hi and welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Basket and I'm the editor-in-chief over at bartalks.net, which is an online resource for the coffee and cocoa professional. So last week, Breville announced that they had purchased LELIT, a well-loved espresso machine manufacturer out of Italy. What does this mean for the industry? What does this mean for Breville or LELIT? Let's discuss. So this came as a little bit of a shock to, I think, a lot of people in the industry, including myself, I'll be honest, but it shouldn't have been really, because Breville has been following this strategy. And that's really what I'm finding tremendously interesting and I want to talk about today. So you could take the opinion that the company, Breville, has been making a number of acquisitions recently just because they've got a pile of cash and they don't know what else to do with it. Or you can take the opinion that there's some kind of mysterious strategy at play here, and what could that be? And I've thought about it, and I've looked into the history of the directors, and specifically the CEO of Breville, which is a guy called Jim Clayton, and I think that I see an evolving pattern. And I think it's fascinating. So this is what I think is going to happen. I'm going to make my predictions today, including timescales and I think some specifics. And in particular, I guess, of interest to the channel, what I think this is going to mean for the kinds of equipment that's going to become available and how they're going to change the product lines. So first things first, if you want to understand really what's happening here, you have to understand the people who are leading the strategy, and a little bit about their background and who they are. So the CEO of Breville in Australia, a sterling company known as Sage in the UK, is a chap called Jim Clayton. Now, if you take a look, he's been in the business for about 6 years. One of the first things he wanted to do when he came on board was consolidate and make a little bit more coordinated and synergistic the operations of the different companies in different regions. Again, Sage operating in the UK, as an example, as a sort of a separate brand, I suspect probably with their own profit and loss, and I think other countries as well, probably maybe by regions. The US probably had their own, guy running it with his own P&L, and Australia and maybe Europe or EMEA. But he understood that needs to be brought together under cohesive brand and marketing strategy. Now, if you take a look at his background, Jim did about 10 years under a private equity business. And I was reading up on a CEO, I think he did an interview in a CEO magazine, where he talked about how influenced he was by a fellow called Romesh Wadhwani, who owned a business called the Symphony Technology Group, which was this private equity business. And under him, he said he learned how to really grow and scale a major business. And clearly that's what his plan is over at Breville. So, but you could ask the question, well, kind of hasn't he already done that? I mean, Breville's already pretty well known. I don't think he has. I think they're just getting started. But also, they are really only well known in a particular segment, and a segment that I suppose attracts some level of skepticism or snobbery from the real coffee aficionados who say that they're just appliances. They actually recognize that to some degree, and I was reading their annual statement where they talked about one of the major initiatives that they're undergoing at the moment is to move away from this throwaway kind of approach that they've got with their appliances, and they do actually refer to them as appliances in their report. And they've got to move towards a more sustainable model where machines are repairable. So that in itself is kind of interesting. The first thing I noticed actually when I read their report was on the front page, bearing in mind Breville, I think the first time I heard of Breville was when I bought their sandwich maker. And, they've got everything from, I think, blenders to toasters and kettles and all the rest of it. all these kitchen appliances that they've got, and I think a lot of people love and know them for. But you go and take a look on their annual report, and the front page of their annual report is covered in images of coffee equipment and machines. I think that gives you a clue as to how important this business is for them. So what have they done? They bought LELIT for 113 million US dollars, thereabouts. I think it was probably in Australian dollars and converted, but thereabouts, that sort of figure. The second interesting thing to note was how that deal was actually structured. Only 50% of it was in cash, and 50% of it was in stock. Now, two things to notice here is, one, that's a lot of money. We don't know what LELIT was earning because they're a private company. We don't know what their profit levels were, what their EBITDA was. But we do know that that's a lot of money even for Breville. They actually earned, I think they had I looked at their balance sheet. They had a cash position as at the end of, I think, 2021, they had a cash position of 130 Australian million, $130. That would be awkward. 130 million Australian dollars, which is about 94 million US dollars. So think about that for a second. They've made an acquisition that's bigger in terms of cash than all the cash that they've got. If you split that 50-50, it's more than half of their entire cash pile has been spent on this one acquisition. That's a big statement. But we'll come on to what they're actually buying, because I can almost guarantee that in terms of strict multiples, as we call them, in terms of valuing a business, there's different ways to value a business, and you normally look at a multiple of the company's net profit or their EBITDA. And different industries have different multiples. So an industry that is sort of software and can scale very quickly might have a multiple of 10 to 20 or whatever. Whereas sort of a more difficult to scale business, something that involves services or manufacturing, might have a multiple of 5 to 10. And I'm pretty sure that this sale price has come at a significant premium to that. Purely my speculation, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And you take a look at what again, the structure and what they've done. They've made that stock only vestable, which means it can only be sold by the directors at LELIT. I don't know, say directors, founders. I only really know of one founder there, which is Mauro Epis. And by the way, we did an interview with Mauro, I think back in 2020 on bartalks.net. I'll leave a link in it below. It's quite interesting. It's sort of interview about how he approached the design for the LELIT Bianca. So I think that this structure where he only gets his payout after 5 years is clearly designed as an incentive to keep him on. And as a matter of fact, he's been appointed to the board, the main board. So clearly they want him, and they want the talent behind LELIT on the main board, driving the strategy of the company. I think that's very interesting. And by the way, a fantastic opportunity for Mauro and his team to do this, because, I went and looked in the background of all the other directors on the board, and none of them have come from a coffee background, which in one respect was surprising initially to me. I thought that somebody there, given the significance of the business to them, would have had some coffee experience. But on the other hand, they've made their success out of making these appliances very appealing to the consumer. In some respects, coming from a traditional coffee background may have actually worked against them. But now what they've got is they've got this tremendous coffee expertise from LELIT. And I bet the conversation went something along the lines of, hey, Mauro, come on board, sit on our main board. We've got money. We've got a brand. You've got ideas. You're innovating. Together, we can take on the world. And I imagine it was something like that. Feel free, Mauro, to drop me a line and let me know how close I am. So this this then begs the question, okay, so what are we going to see? Because, of course, remember back in 2020, they bought Baratza. And a lot of people were talking then saying, oh, it's going to be, is this going to be the end? Is it going to be assimilated like the Borg? And are we gonna see, all the grinders disappear and just become part of the Breville machines? And of course, none of that happened. In fact, I went onto their website. I only found one mention of Breville, and that was in a job application, a job opening. And so none of that's happened. You're thinking, well, so what are they doing? Why have they bought it? And I think when you take a look at these individual actions that have been taken, and then you put them together, you stitch them together, it starts to form a picture. So number one, they bought Baratza, again, perfectly in terms of market positioning, perfect for Breville. Smart acquisition. Founders wanted to retire, I believe. So ideally they probably wanted to get in some expertise, but it wasn't going to be these guys because they wanted to retire, and good for them. But they could buy up the brand, they could buy up the technology, they could buy up the goodwill, and store that away. And I think that's what they've done. They've stashed it away, and they're probably doing some stuff, but it's all in the back end. Nothing outwardly has changed. And by the way, mergers and acquisitions is an art. It is not something that every company does very well. So I actually think Sage/Breville is doing a great job on that. Second thing they did was, I think it was only a week or two ago, they announced beans.com, which is a subscription bean service. And if you read my newsletter, which goes out every week, I talk about, I think it was about 6 months ago, talked about how I felt a company, and I think I mentioned Breville specifically as being probably the best position to do this, a company should work closely with the roasters and integrate some technology between the grinder, the brew method, the brewing technology, and the roaster and the beans that they're using to help the sort of maybe newcomers into the coffee scene who want to get into specialty coffee but get very frustrated with all of the difficulties and the learning curve. Help them just get in the ballpark. So we're not talking about push a button, don't need to worry about anything, it all just comes out perfect. But we're talking about just getting them in the ballpark by the grinder talking to the the brewer, and the brewer saying, wow, it's running a bit fast. The grinder saying, okay, well, maybe we'll need to make some adjustments there, and making recommendations. Just enough to get them in the ballpark, and then give them some nice, easy to use software that says, try tweaking this, push it that way, push it this way a little bit. I don't know. Anyway, something like that. So I talked about that, and I suggested that I honestly think that's the way the world is going to go in this particular demographic, for this demographic. And lo and behold, Breville launches beans.com. As it stands right now, just a bunch of roasters, subscription service, very benign, nothing to see here. But I bet you there's a plan there. There's a plan there at the very, very least. Worst case scenario, you can push a button on your espresso machine and order more beans. They could do that in the future, even if there's nothing smart about it. But I'll tell you why I think there's going to be something smart. There's more than just my sixth sense, right? There's actually some history to back this up, and it kind of goes back. So I'll come back to that in just a second, because the second thing they did, of course, beans.com, they got the Baratza, they got beans.com, then they buy LELIT, and importantly, they get the expertise. They get the guys at LELIT to come on board the main board and drive product innovation and design and whatever. So you can start to see that potentially, something's happening here. Now let's go back to Jim Clayton and see what else he did, because after moving on from Symphony, where he learned about how to grow and scale a big business, he went to work for LG. And what was he doing there? It wasn't coffee. It was IoT, Internet of Things. He was learning how to make IoT, the Internet of Things. I think smart light bulbs and your Alexa devices, those sorts of things. All those, I think LG has some pretty awful things. Some fridges that know when you're out of milk and things like that. And he had a very practical thing. I remember reading something he said about about IoT has to be practical. Like if you don't put it in for the sake of the technology, put it in when it has some practical purpose and use. And I'm certain that they're bringing now these ideas of how technology can improve coffee making for the masses. Perhaps not for a lot of us who are sort of really into it, but for the masses. But also, why not for us? I mean, we all kind of sneered at the automatic milk frothing technology that Breville brought in. But you know what? A lot of people are coming around saying it's actually not too bad. And it'll get better. And we're seeing more and more companies come out and mimic those innovations. Secondly, I think this is my very specific plan or idea. If it was me, and I was doing this, my first thought, it's my board meeting, sitting down, hello guys, welcome to the board meeting, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I think we should do. I would have two lines. I would have the consumer line, the appliances. Yes, we need to make them more repairable and et cetera, but nevertheless, they are for people who've got a Breville toaster, they've got a Breville kettle, and they kind of want to make some coffee at home, so they want a Breville coffee maker at home, okay? There's a line for those people, and then I think there's the premium line. Then there's the prosumer line, which is where the LELIT brand will come in, whether they keep it as LELIT or whether it becomes sort of the Breville Pro line. I don't know. So I take the existing Breville lines as it is. They've got a lot of machines in that lineup, probably a little bit too many, I have to say. And I'd cut that down to maybe 3. I'd keep the Breville Sage Bambino. I'd keep the Barista Express. And I'd keep the Touch. And that would be it. So if you want an appliance type device, one of those 3 will do the job for you. If, on the other hand, you want to move up, start getting serious about your coffee, don't worry about it. We've got you covered. We'll do the LELIT brand, or let's just call it for the sake of argument, the Breville Pro range. And on the Breville Pro range, you get your, HX machine, your dual boiler machines, your Bianca, whatever else. But better integrations into the Baratza grinders, sold as a package, maybe some software that helps tie it all together, and unique features. And that's where Mauro and his team are going to come in and come up with some creative ideas, I'm sure. And so that starts to make a lot of sense. Oh, and by the way, of course, the beans, don't forget the beans. Now I've got a one-stop shop. I can go in, I can grab my Breville or my Breville Pro, get my beans supplied. I know it's all going to work well together because it's all been tested. Settings have been checked. I can go online. Don't go online. I've got an app. I hate apps, but I can see it making sense here. I've got an app with different recipes on it, which says, if you've got a Breville Pro, XL such and such machine, and these beans, then this is the perfect setting. This is a great recipe. I think that's the plan. I would think that this is going to be a threat. I'll tell you this is going to be a threat for. This is going to be a threat largely to companies like Gaggia at the prosumer end, I think. I think Profitec are going to struggle when this comes out, unless they can really innovate. I even think my beloved Rocket potentially might see a little bit of erosion at the bottom end of their machines. Not at the top end, but at the bottom end. Companies like La Marzocco and Victoria Arduino and Slayer, they're at the upper end of the market. They're in a different place, so they'll be fine. But I'm very interested. I'm actually quite excited about what the company can do. Mauro's going to now have a war chest. He's going to have some deep pockets, a sugar daddy, which he can call upon to manifest these ideas that he's clearly had. So tell me what you think. Am I right? Am I way off base? Tell me if I'm wrong. Or what do you think your ideas are? Leave them in the comments below, because I do respond to those and I love hearing them, even when I get them thoroughly wrong. So we'll see how it transpires. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.